We just do coming out of.
Oh, good, okay. It's hard to hear up here, but maybe it's
It's
my...
hard to hear the need too.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just you. We just do coming out of the cadenza. I made a wrong note to myself.
Where would you like to get started?
Carol, that was a day. It was today.
Really just on the last four trills.
And those were all
Four.
two.
And you have. Is all you have, right? Just some.
You were with
I
her?
had that little.
Were with the boat?
Yeah.
Right.
And then that thing was,
That was a down.
there was a place where it was a double
Okay, I
something.
mean, yeah, I wrote down the wrong thing.
Cheryl, did you get something at 372? There was a double somewhere. Like at the first or second measure,
Oh, no,
there was
that's
a double
like
up or a double down.
Still, yeah. Just not a 2 section. This is just going into measure 417, coming out of the cadenza, please. The last 4 bar, which has 4 separate trills.
There was just one place near the beginning that I was not sure what was going on. So here's C. And when I'm looking at it before, it's sort of back on B and C, where I have all this stuff. It seemed like,
This
was I going too slowly? I felt like you were really pushing me in there.
Okay.
So
I wasn't trying to. Do you want to run that section super quick, or do you feel okay?
I think it'd be nice to just,
Great.
where would be a place to start?
Bum, 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 bum. Our statement there, maybe?
Okay.
To get into it?
Yeah.
So we're going to start 140, 141, 142.
So the,
That's before your little thematic thing, which is like everything.
oh, right before the chromatic, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Your chromatic run, obviously. 142, please. 142.
You were going faster than Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that same spot one more time, please. And so, you know, we started going awry, and I'll make sure that we don't, but it was in the offbeats afterwards. So right at 142 again, please. Yeah, so,
Just be careful that it doesn't put rush there.
okay, yeah. And so, you know, at least for what I feel here, we tend to push a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's okay.
it doesn't matter, yeah.
But this is where I feel like.
But these two where we're coming in with you.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
here coming, instead of, it's the same thing. These 2 bars were,
Second.
Yeah,
that just felt weird to me, but yeah, so I'll make sure here that.
I think I here I kept feeling that you were here to delegate.
Yeah, just easy on, we were with you. Okay, great. Moving 2, please. Actually, just real quick before we get the couple of things just to think about. We're not going to go back and do anything right now. But strings, please coordinate note length, especially on offbeats. There's really just, for the quarter note, there's really only two lengths. There's two different ones, whether or not it has a little staccato cap accent, which is shorter, zum, bum, or if it's not long, it still needs space. It should err on the short side. The last thing we want to do is hold it over. So feel zum, 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 zum. Yeah, and it's easy enough to match bows with principals and watch for that to feel the release, but it should all feel together. And there were a couple of times, although we corrected after I so rudely shouted it out, but just making sure that we have that space, that we have that articulation, that is all synonymous. And then winds, just a couple of places to watch intonation. Letter D is one, and then our high notes prior to that, the whole notes in our flutes, and matching that down with the oboe with the two of you, having that be locked in. Horn, pedal tone intonation was great. Sounds awesome. Two. if we can start at that 2D section, which is literally just 2 bars before we, actually no, 2D sections back, which is bar 30, 31, 32.
Okay.
Great.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
When we come in on measure 12, originally, you were thinking, I didn't know if you were thinking of starting at 1, or you're going to start at right when we come in.
I'll start right when you come in. Sorry, great, yeah. My apologies.
Oh, where's that?
So Diana will finish out her phrase, and then we'll give it a breath. I'll give you bomb, bomb, bomb. Actually, let's just do that, right? No, we'll track back and do that. I want to keep mental, but we'll go back and do that.
I don't think you was too much space.
No, just enough to clear the sound. So let us. I don't want to lead. Just a little bit of breath.
Yeah.
So bar 32. Bar 32. And it's just listening for intonation, and then also just keeping it. It's so slow, but it's beautiful slow. So just be gentle with how we play. codify our lengths on these notes. So we have a half note on all the beginning of these phrases, with the exception, sometimes we'll have 16, but when you have like, so in bar 80, in bar 77, think about ending it on the downbeat of the next beat. So, and a half note is actually going to be cut off on beat 2. Ba. If you have your 16th note, you can end before ba. But if you have a half note, it has to go all the way down to the end of the next beat. And we're not all, we have lots of different lengths. I'm trying, and I'll make sure I give you a good cut to you. But again, your half note line, ba, 2, 3, 4. Okay?
Hey, Matt?
Tina.
Yeah, I'm looking.
And now.
The 3 after K, I couldn't see the violins and I couldn't see you for entrance and we were late.
Yep.
Yeah, that was tricky.
We'll mark that spot and we'll do it. And maybe not right now because I want to make sure we get through the whole thing, but yeah. And I'll make sure that I open up a lot better for you. Can we please start? Actually, write it letter L, if that works for you, Diana.
Yeah.
Write a letter L. Yeah, I would love just to do that again for me too. Can we go right after the year?
The last run starts on the B or?
Yeah, from the top of that run, your E major arc that you roll.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. This is right from bar 77, please. 77, yeah, right from bar 77. One more time, please, Anna. Just for me. Yep. If we can start together on that bar. horn pedals are so low. Do you want to just bring them up an octave?
Well, then I'm in unison, or if I bring them up and I'm.
That's fine with me.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's so low, and it's just, I mean, especially,
It's hard.
wasn't even written on an F horn, so, right?
Can we try it?
Up an octave?
No.
No.
Straight.
The what?
She's gonna try the pedals.
Sure. This is, just horns. Let's just do those pedals. And one. Yeah, it's better for sure. I'll put it in your part and we can just think about it. But the other thing that I think is hard about the pedal is it becomes a whomp, whomp, whomp. And as much as we can try to avoid that, so it's more almost, it's almost like you're impersonating the timpani for a hot second where it has just a boom, boom, boom.
Want to try one more time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait, are you giving us one?
I was giving you 1 and 2 because you're coming on 3.
That's what I thought.
1, yeah, and you track sharp a little bit on that long helmet, so just watch there. Yeah, cool, great.
We have a little clip
That work?
between I and K, the middle.
I think I marked that to go over. Yeah. Over there, and yeah, in the. We're gonna keep pressing just to make sure we get through everything. Okay. And I have a question for you afterwards.
So we're going to try to do an attack up more or less in concert.
Yes.
Start.
Yep.
Talking about
No, we'll be good. So in the moment, in the concert, it will be quasi-attacca between the two. There won't be much of a pause, and Diana will just sort of kick right in after we let that last note breathe. We'll actually go from the last 3 bars to practice that. When we get to the final bar, think about bomb, bomb. A nice gentle fortissimo that's pretty full and you can let ring. So just watch me for the cough. This is the final 3 bars of the movement.
Yeah.
That intonation is fantastic. Can we do a better last note, please? Just feel that it's the last thing. You have to make it great. You can VC everything, strings, there's no need to do, and we're definitely not rolling however you do it, but feel just this last bar, very last bar. Sorry, one more time. And then if we can vibrate, please, as we release, so it's less of a choke and more of a, and keep it vibrating after you go off, so it just doesn't take the sound and constrict it. Last time. 182. Margaret's the star of the show here, people. And I can't really hear Margaret. But no strings, we're very, very textural here. And we just came careening into that, and we really overpowered. So we have to be very clear. And this is, we're coming from the biggest forte. It sounded fantastic. Shrink it right back in, shrink it right back in. Bar 180, which is just the last bump, bump, bump before the clarinet solo. 180. So as a reminder, so Diana, she has ba-da-ba-ba-ba, which is, and it comes up into beat 2. So I will give you the prep as Diana goes, da-ya-ba-da-ba-ba, and that's our downbeat into 408. If you could just do from the
Figure out which note to start out.
G. Last three bars, please. Last 3 bars. One more time. Just feel that last beat slightly longer than the other. Watch my cut. Yeah. Boom. Yeah, absolutely. There we go. Thank you. Bravo. 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 There's a couple spots that we'll tag before the council. Let me know there's something else you have. If not, well, let's bring Greg up for Among the Hidden, please.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much, everybody. It's not too bad.
We'll jump to Among the Hidden. People are
Oh, you're nice to say that. I hate listening to the sound of my own voice.
Pretty much all of them.
Greg Marcinegger! Sorry, just kidding. Hi, Polly.
Curious pencil. Hanging out of your back pocket.
Could you pass me that other score, please? Thank you very much. Among the Hidden. Drama. The drama of Beethoven, the drama of Julie. Right from the top, please. Shelley, I'm supposed to know that it's hard to see here. You should really think about feeling and breathing that placement of all these bits together. You have to be a rock. No pressure. Just nail that entrance again. Just feel that triplet subdivision with Greg the whole time. Because you're hearing bop, 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 bop. And then you have the duple. But that triplet, let's just focus on that because we were not quite clean. Bar number 3, please. I'm going to make you all count for people who have rests, but I'll keep you too. Except for Sue. No, next
No,
bar.
that's bar 4.
So we have bar 4, so
yeah,
we get the
I
subdivision.
was looking at.
Bar 3, and. Right from the top, right from the top,
We need to wait too.
right from the top. That's how you waste like 30 seconds of rehearsal. I'm better than that sometimes. Not always. I'm just talking too much. Perfect, Violins. That was perfect. know it says like I want it to ring. Cool.
Okay, yeah.
Did you change something?
Great, we're gonna take a break, please, and then we'll come back. No, we will not actually.
Oh, okay.
Good?
Okay.
Feel good?
There's an 810 board up there, and I just plug in a hard drive, and it's just like.
Cool. So a couple of notes. To reiterate the program order, it is the first half is Defia, the ritual fire dance, followed by Borodine, followed by 2 balloons. We have halftime. After halftime, we come back and we open with Among the Hidden, and then end with Diana. The piano will come on during halftime, so Shelly and Daisy need to make sure we get all, and actually everyone, during intermission, please take all your instruments off stage, and then that way there'll be ample room to pull us back and bring the piano out. What else am I missing?
I think you got the gist of it.
All right.
Yeah, great.
Margaret.
The room back there, the new room.
And the new room,
Yes.
which I'm not exactly sure which one it is, but they're yeah, it's great. We've got lots of space now. Yeah, you try to go to where the old like weird little dressing room was, and now it's just an open hallway into beautiful space.
So no cases like underneath the risers or anything like that. There will be tables back there. Plenty of room for everyone.
Is it locked?
Right now,
Be locked during the concert?
I can make sure of that. Yes.
Yep. Make sure it's good. Margaret, anything from your end? Remember to bring stands and all of that. Great. The call on Saturday is 5:30. Call on Saturday is 5:30. Call on Sunday is 2:30. We'll touch some stuff. Just so you know, it won't be much, but it'll be enough to get sound in space, and there's a couple things that we'll need to go over. And that's all I got.
And one more thing.
And one more thing, yes.
We'll be sending out blurbs, short and long, so that you can put on front porch form or share by email if you're letting people know.
Awesome. Perfect. And dress code is all black. So nice black pants, black shirt, black shoes, bright red socks.
Matt, one more thing.
Yes.
Stand lights for everyone.
We will provide, Stefan has stand lights. If you have your own, bring it, but Stefan has stand lights for it because we only have 2 balloons, which we'll do today, but with,
We will lower the lights a lot.
yeah, in the concert we'll lower the lights a lot. I'll have light on me so you can see me, no problem. And just, we're not going to worry about it too much tonight, but we'll do a dry run of it. So just a heads up for that, which will be nice for the Beethoven. All right. Defia boarding 2 balloons. Right from the top, please. Yeah.
She's using her phone right now, so I think that.
Yeah,
you
sorry.
just
Good.
missed one. But-
Cool,
So
yeah,
I just
but-
filled in the blanks.
Awesome, yeah, so it just should keep the bop, 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 bop going throughout the whole
Yeah, sorry, I was
thing.
changing this.
All good, all good, all good. 4 bars before rehearsal 24. don't drag. Where you at? Great. Cool. Going on. Pretty great brass moment. One trombone together. Sounds pretty good. Wording, please. Right from the top. Sorry, we're just going to pause for a second. We're trying to pull us back a little bit. The section keeps trying to really run away with us. We're at like a half note to 80, so it's easy to want to rush, but if this gets pulled back, then all the other tempo jumps make sense. And it, again, at tempo 1, it's letter E, it's an abrupt drop back. Boarding forgot how to make either a ritardando or an accelerando in this entire first movement. Just to be clear, they're almost always immediate tempo jumps. So just have to be careful and watch. Can we take it from letter, 2 bars before letter F, please? Letter F is in Frankie.
Oh, yeah.
2 bars before letter F. 1, 2. Cool. Yeah, a couple spots for sure. We'll tag a couple of spots when we get there, but just real quick, the big spot that I marked to just take a look at is the 5/8 right before R. Things got a little wonky there, so if you're playing in the 5/8 right before R, just mark that. But that was fun. That was great. I kind of love that symphony. It's weird. 2 balloons, please. Yeah.
Whoever is tapping their foot, glued to the
What were you saying? You can't avoid heavy beats.
Wear socks.
So I always like to have at least one piece that like pushes us a good bit, and like the Amy Beach a couple you remember the first rehearsal was a nightmare. It was great. I mean, we can think back to the first rehearsal in this, which was rough. Yeah, because you have to. It's like a different way of playing, a different way of thinking, and so it's cool to have a piece like this that pushes us and we grow with. And for me to be nitpicky, be like, yeah, check out that spot before letter R. It's awesome, and so it's very, very cool and very, very amazing. So bravo, everybody. Balloons. Right from the top. Stefan, at your leisure, my friend. Awesome, Betsy. Just keep going until you can't go anymore.
Sorry.
You can have more from the percussion thing, just whatever. It could be faster, actually. Cool. I know you can't see anything, but it works splendidly with what's on screen.
Can we see how dark the stage is going to be?
Do you want to see we'll have standlights, but do you want to just for like the movie's purpose or?
Just to see how dark.
Can you start it again and just kill the lights on stage, Stefan, so we'll see what it'll actually look like? No, it's brilliant glory. As he's doing that, I gotta tell you, I always feel like such a